Ella sat in the corner of her favorite cafe, her legs swinging beneath the table as she sipped the brightly colored alien fruit juice she had grown fond of. The colony planet was always bustling, but this cafe was her little haven, a quiet place where the galaxy didn't feel so overwhelming. Her parents were off attending to their endless diplomatic duties, leaving Ella with free afternoons to wander and explore. Her eyes wandered the room as she fiddled with the straw in her drink. She noticed a figure sitting alone by the window, a tall, strange-looking alien with skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under the cafe's soft lights. He was cloaked, his face hard to see, but something about the way he sat, the way his shoulders slumped, caught Ella's attention. He looked lonely. Ella was never one to shy away from strangers. With a curious smile, she stood up, her curiosity getting the better of her as she walked over to his table. "Hi," she said cheerfully, looking up at him. "Mind if I sit?" The alien glanced down at her, clearly taken aback by her directness. For a moment, there was silence, as if he was deciding whether to respond. His voice, when he finally spoke, was deep and resonant, almost vibrating in the air. "You wish to sit with me?" "Yeah," Ella said, sliding into the seat across from him without waiting for an answer. "You look like you could use some company." The alien's glowing eyes flickered with something unreadable, but he said nothing. Ella didn't mind. She was used to filling silences. "I'm Ella, by the way," she said, resting her chin in her hands. "I come here a lot. My parents are busy with their stuff, so I usually just hang out here after school." Still, the alien said nothing, though his gaze hadn't left her face. She could tell she had his attention, so she kept talking. "What's your name?" The alien hesitated, as if considering the weight of his answer. "Tormac," he said finally, his voice low. "Tormac," Ella repeated with a grin. "That's a cool name. You from around here?" Tormac's lips twitched, though Ella couldn't tell if it was amusement or something else. "No," he said simply. Ella nodded, as if she understood completely. "Didn't think so. You don't look like any of the locals I've seen. Are you traveling?" "In a manner of speaking," Tormac said, his tone vague. He didn't elaborate, and Ella didn't push him. She wasn't interested in prying, just talking. "I want to travel someday," she said after a moment. "See the galaxy, explore new planets. My parents always talk about all these different places they go for their work, but I never get to go with them. I think it'd be amazing to just hop from one planet to the next, meeting new people, seeing new things." Tormac's glowing eyes focused more intently on her, as if something she said resonated with him. "It can be overwhelming," he said slowly. "The galaxy is vast. Not all places are kind to wanderers. That's what makes it exciting, though, right?" Ella beamed. "All the possibilities. All the places you could go, the things you could see. Even the dangerous parts make it seem like an adventure." Tormac leaned back slightly, his gaze growing more distant. "You see the galaxy with young eyes. There is a purity in that perspective." Ella cocked her head. "What do you mean?" "You do not yet know the burdens of such a journey," Tormac said, his voice tinged with a weariness that Ella hadn't noticed before. "The weight of responsibility, of leadership. It can be crushing." Ella frowned, thinking about his words. "Sounds like you've had to deal with a lot of that." Tormac didn't answer immediately. He seemed lost in thought, his eyes flickering as if remembering something distant. "More than you can imagine," he said softly. Ella didn't fully understand what he meant, but she felt a strange sympathy for him. "Well, I think everyone needs a break sometimes. Maybe you just need to look at things from a different angle. That's what I do when stuff gets too hard." Tormac's eyes flicked back to her, and for the first time, Ella thought she saw a flicker of surprise in his expression. "A different angle?" "Yeah," Ella said with a shrug. "Like if something's too big to handle all at once, maybe you just have to look at one part of it. Focus on the small stuff and let the big stuff wait." Tormac studied her for a long moment, as if turning her words over in his mind. Then, to Ella's surprise, he nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right," he said, almost to himself. Perhaps I have been looking at things from the wrong angle for too long. Ella smiled, feeling like she'd somehow helped, even if she didn't fully understand what he was talking about. See? You just gotta think about it differently. Tormac looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. You are very different from the others I have met. Ella laughed. Well, I hope that's a good thing. Tormac didn't respond right away, but there was a softness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Yes, he said quietly. It is. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe around them a gentle background to their conversation. Ella, as always, filled the quiet with more questions. So, do you think you'll keep traveling? Or do you have a home somewhere? Tormac looked out the window, his gaze distant again. Home is complicated. Ella wrinkled her nose. That sounds like a story. Tormac's lips quirked, almost a smile. Perhaps it is. Ella beamed, satisfied with that answer, and took a long sip from her drink. She could tell there was more to Tormac than he was letting on, but she wasn't in a hurry to figure it out. She liked talking to him, and that was enough for now. As the cafe began to empty out and the sky outside grew dim, Tormac finally stood, towering over Ella. It is time for me to go, he said, his voice soft but firm. Ella looked up at him, a little disappointed but understanding. Okay. Will you come back tomorrow? Tormac hesitated, then nodded. Yes, he said. I will. Ella smiled brightly. Great! I'll see you then. With a final glance, Tormac turned and left the cafe, his tall figure disappearing into the growing twilight. Ella watched him go, her mind already buzzing with curiosity about their next conversation. She had no idea that she had just made a friend in one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. For her, Tormac was just an interesting alien with a lot of stories to tell. And that, she thought, was more than enough reason to keep talking. Ella and Tormac's meetings became a regular occurrence, their conversations flowing more easily with each passing day. Each time they met, Ella would rush over, practically bouncing with excitement, always ready with a barrage of questions about the galaxy, the strange things she saw on the colony, or her dreams of exploration. Tormac, though quieter, found himself looking forward to these moments more than he had expected. At first, their discussions were light, filled with Ella's endless curiosity. She talked about her parents, their diplomatic missions, and how they were always away, leaving her plenty of time to dream about the far-off places she wanted to visit. Tormac listened with quiet amusement, occasionally offering vague comments about worlds he had seen, but always careful to keep his words measured. Ella, for her part, didn't push too hard. She liked that Tormac seemed to listen so well. What's the weirdest place you've ever been? Ella asked one day, her eyes wide with excitement. I bet you've seen some really crazy stuff. Tormac considered her question for a moment, his glowing eyes flickering faintly. There are many places in the galaxy that would seem strange to you, he said carefully. Some worlds are so alien that even I found them difficult to understand. Ella leaned forward, captivated. Like what? Tormac hesitated, then spoke slowly. There is a planet where the inhabitants communicate only through light. Their thoughts are projected as beams of color, and their emotions are seen as shifting hues in the air around them. Whoa! Ella whispered, her face lighting up with awe. That's amazing! I can't even imagine what that must be like. How do they talk to other species? They don't, Tormac said simply. Their language is too complex for outsiders to grasp. They remain isolated, hidden away in their light, understanding only themselves. Ella frowned, thinking it over. That sounds kinda lonely, don't you think? Tormac paused, his eyes flickering again. Yes, he said after a moment. It is. The conversation shifted then, moving on to lighter topics, but the weight of that brief exchange lingered in Tormac's mind. Ella had a way of asking questions that seemed so innocent, yet they cut deeper than she realized. Her ability to see things from a simple, human perspective made him consider his own life in ways he hadn't in centuries. As their friendship grew, Tormac found himself revealing more about his travels, though always in careful, measured doses. He spoke of the vastness of space, the endless wars and treaties that shaped the galaxy, and the weight of responsibility that came with such knowledge. But he never revealed his true identity, not yet. Ella, oblivious to the significance of his words, often responded with her own musings, weaving her dreams of becoming an explorer with the wisdom she thought she was gathering from Tormak's stories. She admired his calm demeanor, his mysterious aura, and the way he seemed to know so much about the galaxy. "You're like a wise old traveler," she said one day, grinning up at him. "You've probably seen everything there is to see, huh?" Tormak allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "Not everything," he said. "There are always new things to discover, no matter how long one has lived." Ella's grin widened. "That's what I love about the galaxy. It's so huge you could spend your whole life exploring and still never see it all." Tormak nodded, though his thoughts drifted elsewhere. He had seen more of the galaxy than most beings ever would, but Ella's perspective, so full of hope and wonder, was something he had lost long ago. The burdens of leadership, the weight of responsibility, had long since crushed any sense of wonder he once had. But in Ella, he saw a spark of something he had forgotten. Her youthful optimism, her relentless curiosity, reminded him of the galaxy's beauty in a way he hadn't experienced in centuries. She saw the stars as an adventure, not a battlefield. And for the first time in a long while, Tormak began to wonder if he could learn something from this human child. Their meetings continued, each one deepening their bond. Ella began to share more personal details, like how she sometimes felt lonely when her parents were gone, and how she longed for adventure but didn't always know where to find it. Tormak listened, offering advice when he could, though he still kept much of himself hidden. He couldn't reveal who he truly was, not yet. He wasn't ready for that. Still, there were moments when his true identity almost slipped through the cracks. Once, when Ella asked him about leadership, Tormak spoke more candidly than he intended. "Leadership is a burden," he said, his voice low and serious. "It is not the power that weighs the heaviest, but the responsibility. To lead is to carry the fate of many on your shoulders, knowing that each decision could be their last." Ella blinked, taken aback by the intensity of his words. "That sounds hard," she said quietly. "It is," Tormak agreed. "And it is a burden that few can truly bear." Ella considered his words, then shrugged. "Well, I guess that's why you've got to have friends, right? People who can help you carry the weight when it gets too heavy." Tormak looked at her, surprised by her insight. "Yes," he said softly. "Perhaps you are right." The conversation moved on, but Tormak couldn't shake the feeling that Ella, in her own way, was offering him something he had long forgotten, the idea that even the strongest leader didn't have to bear the weight alone. As the weeks passed, their friendship continued to grow, though Ella remained blissfully unaware of the true significance of the man sitting across from her in the café. For her, Tormak was just an interesting alien with lots of stories to tell, a mysterious figure who seemed to know more about the galaxy than anyone she had ever met. And for Tormak, Ella was a glimpse into a world he had long since left behind, a world of simplicity, of wonder, of human resilience. She didn't know it, but her presence had become a source of comfort for him, a small reminder that even in the vastness of the galaxy, there were still things worth caring about. The bond between them was growing stronger, though either of them fully understood the significance of what they were building. For now, it was enough to sit together, share stories, and simply be in each other's company. Tormak knew the time would come when he would have to reveal the truth, but for now, he allowed himself to enjoy the simplicity of their friendship, savoring the moments of peace that Ella unknowingly brought into his life. One afternoon, as Ella and Tormak sat in their usual spot, the café was unusually quiet. Ella chatted happily, telling Tormak about a book she had been reading about ancient explorers who charted the first interstellar routes, her excitement infectious. Tormak listened with his usual calm, though something in his demeanor seemed slightly more guarded than usual. Unbeknownst to Ella, danger was brewing in the shadows. Across the galaxy, whispers had spread about the Emperor's disappearance, and certain factions were determined to use his absence as an opportunity to seize control. Assassins had been sent to track him down, and they had finally located him, here, sitting in a quiet cafe with a human child, completely unaware that his enemies were closing in. Ella remained oblivious, too wrapped up in her excitement about the explorers to notice the subtle tension in Tormak's movements. He kept glancing towards the door, his glowing eyes flickering as though sensing a disturbance. Yet he said nothing, not wanting to alarm Ella. As she continued talking, the door to the cafe opened, and a group of aliens walked in, their eyes scanning the room. Tormak stiffened immediately, his gaze narrowing. These were not regular patrons. The assassins had arrived. Ella finally noticed Tormak's change in demeanor. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, frowning. "You look—" "Ella," Tormak interrupted, his voice low and urgent. "Stay very still. Do not draw attention to yourself." Ella froze, confusion flickering across her face. "What's going on?" Before Tormak could respond, the aliens moved swiftly, their weapons discreetly drawn. They were closing in on Tormak's position, their intentions clear. Ella's heart raced as she glanced around, trying to understand what was happening. Her mind buzzed with a mix of fear and confusion. Why were these aliens looking at Tormak like that? Without warning, one of the assassins lunged forward, aiming a concealed weapon directly at Tormak. Time seemed to slow for Ella as she realized what was happening. They were trying to hurt him. Acting on pure instinct, Ella grabbed her nearly empty glass of alien fruit juice and flung it at the attacker. The bright, sticky liquid splashed across the alien's face, causing him to stagger back in surprise. It wasn't much, but it was enough to throw off his aim. Tormak, using the momentary distraction, moved with lightning speed. He stood and disarmed the assassin in a fluid motion, his years of training as an emperor showing in that single, graceful action. The other assassins reacted, closing in, but Tormak was already ahead of them. "Stay behind me, Ella," he ordered, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it. Ella, still shaken but determined, nodded and ducked behind the table. She didn't understand what was going on, but she knew that Tormak was in danger, and she wasn't about to let these aliens hurt him without a fight. Tormak dispatched the remaining assassins with efficiency, his movements precise and controlled. It was clear now that he was far more than the quiet, lonely figure Ella had befriended. His strength and skill were undeniable, and for the first time, Ella began to realize that her friend was not just an ordinary traveler. The last assassin fell to the ground, unconscious, and Tormak turned to Ella, his glowing eyes dimming slightly. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now, concern lacing his words. Ella shook her head, still trying to process everything. "I'm fine." What just happened? Who were those guys?" Tormak hesitated, then sighed. "They were after me," he admitted. "I am not who you think I am, Ella." Ella's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? Who are you?" Tormak looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing whether to tell her the truth. Finally he spoke. "I am Tormak, ruler of the Galactic Empire." For a moment, there was only silence. Ella blinked, her mind struggling to catch up with what he had just said. "Wait, what? You're the Emperor? Of the whole galaxy?" Tormak nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes." Ella stared at him, her thoughts spinning. She had spent all this time talking to the Galactic Emperor, and hadn't even realized it. All those cryptic comments he had made, all those stories about leadership and responsibility, it all made sense now. But still, it was a lot to take in. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Tormak's gaze softened. "I wanted to escape the weight of my title, if only for a little while. You were different. You spoke to me as a person, not an emperor. I did not want to lose that." Ella bit her lip, still trying to wrap her head around it all. But then, looking at Tormak, she realized that it didn't really matter. He was still the same person she had been talking to all this time, the same person she had shared her dreams and stories with. Emperor or not, he was still her friend. "Okay," she said finally, nodding to herself. So you're the Emperor. But you're also Tormac, right? Tormac blinked, surprised by her response. Yes, he said slowly. I am. Then it doesn't matter, Ella said, smiling up at him. You're still the same person. You're still my friend. Tormac looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. For a moment he didn't speak, and when he did, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. Thank you, Ella? Ella grinned, feeling a strange sense of relief. No problem. But, maybe next time, give me a heads up if people are going to try and kill you. Tormac chuckled, a rare sound that Ella hadn't heard from him before. I will do my best. The danger had passed, but the reality of who Tormac was still hung in the air. Ella knew things would be different now, but she also knew that their friendship was stronger than ever. She had stood by him when it mattered, and that was all that counted. As they left the cafe together, Ella couldn't help but feel proud of herself. She had helped save the Galactic Emperor, not because he was a ruler, but because he was her friend. And that, she thought, was a pretty cool story to tell. As the dust settled from the incident, the atmosphere between Ella and Tormac had shifted. She now understood the weight he carried, the hidden truth about who he really was, but that didn't change how she felt about him. He was still Tormac, her friend. But Tormac's life was no longer just about quiet conversations in a cafe. His time with Ella had been a brief escape from the overwhelming responsibilities that awaited him, but he knew it couldn't last forever. The next day, when they met at the cafe, Tormac seemed different. He was quieter, more serious. Ella could tell something was bothering him, though he didn't say anything at first. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Tormac spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. Ella, I must leave soon. Ella's heart sank. She had known this moment would come eventually, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. Because of what happened yesterday? She asked quietly. Tormac nodded. Yes. My absence from the Empire has caused unrest. The incident with the assassins was only the beginning. I cannot stay here and put you in danger. I must return to my duties. Ella looked down at the table, her fingers tracing patterns on the surface. So this is goodbye, then? Tormac hesitated before answering. For now, yes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both. Ella understood that Tormac had responsibilities far beyond what she could comprehend, but that didn't make saying goodbye any easier. I'll miss you, Ella said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. And I will miss you, Tormac replied, his tone sincere. Ella looked up at him, her eyes bright with determination. You're going to be okay, right? I mean, with all the stuff you have to deal with. Tormac gave her a small, sad smile. I will manage. I always have. Ella wasn't satisfied with that answer. You don't have to do it alone, you know. You've got people who can help you, right? Advisors, guards, whatever. They can help you carry the load. Tormac considered her words. It is true that I have many who serve me. But the burden of leadership is mine alone. No one else can carry it. Ella frowned. That sounds really lonely. Tormac looked at her, a flicker of something like sadness passing over his features. It is. Ella bit her lip, thinking. Well, you can always come back here, right? If things get too heavy, you can come back and visit. Tormac didn't respond right away. He looked out the window, his expression distant. Perhaps, he said finally, though they both knew it was unlikely. Ella leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern. Just don't forget what we talked about, okay? You don't have to fix everything all at once. Sometimes you just have to look at things from a different angle. Tormac looked at her, his glowing eyes softening. I will remember that. There was another pause, then Tormac reached into his cloak and pulled out a small object. It was a pendant, intricately carved with strange, alien symbols that glowed faintly. He placed it on the table in front of Ella. This is a token, he said. It represents a promise. Ella picked up the pendant, turning it over in her hands. A promise? Tormac nodded. If you ever find yourself in need, if you ever wish to see more of the galaxy, you need only present this. It will ensure that you are welcomed wherever you go. Ella's eyes widened as she realized the significance of the gift. You mean I could visit other planets? I could explore? Yes, Tormac said. When the time is right, this will allow you to see the galaxy as you have always dreamed. Ella stared at the pendant, her heart racing with excitement. It was the opportunity she had always wanted, a chance to explore the galaxy. But as thrilling as the idea was, she knew it wasn't something she could do just yet. She was still young, and her parents, well, they'd probably freak out if she tried to leave the planet. Thank you, Ella said sincerely, slipping the pendant into her pocket. I'll keep it safe. Tormac stood then, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the table. Ella stood too, feeling the weight of the moment. This was really goodbye. Take care, Tormac, she said, her voice soft but steady. Tormac looked down at her, his expression unreadable. And you, Ella. You have a great future ahead of you. I believe you will accomplish much. Ella smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. I'll try. With that, Tormac turned and walked towards the door, his cloak swirling around him as he moved. Ella watched him go, her heart heavy but full of pride. She had befriended the Galactic Emperor, saved his life, and helped him remember what it meant to be human, or at least, to be connected to others. It was more than she had ever expected. As Tormac disappeared into the street, Ella sat back down at the table, her fingers brushing the pendant in her pocket. She didn't know when, or if, she would ever see him again, but she knew that their friendship had made a difference. Not just to her, but to him as well. For now, life would go back to normal. But one day, when the time was right, she would use the pendant. She would explore the galaxy, just as she had always dreamed. And maybe, just maybe, she would see Tormac again. The thought brought a small, hopeful smile to her face. Whatever happened next, she knew that she had a friend out there in the stars, a friend who believed in her. And that, she thought, was enough for now. As she left the cafe, her mind buzzed with possibilities. The galaxy was vast, and her journey was just beginning. She wasn't in a rush. She had time. And when the time came, she would be ready. For now, though, she was content to wait. After all, the stars weren't going anywhere. And neither was her friendship with the Galactic Emperor.